With Sling, you get all your favorite news programs for just $40 a month.
What if I only watch news about whether or not I can afford a boat?
$40 a month.
What about news about how I lost money on the stock market, then made money on the stock market, then...
Still $40.
What about news I only watch so I have something to make small talk about in uncomfortable situations? Did you know police captured 5 runaway zebras in Washington yesterday?
Well played. Get all your favorite news programs for the best price. Sling lets you do that. Visit sling.com/now to see your offer.
Now streaming on Hulu.
This guy is an evil genius. He's the best serial killer that ever existed.
He compared himself to Ted Bundy.
The serial killer you don't know.
Who is this guy?
Pure evil. This is not just any killer.
In his own words.
Put my head right up to her ear and I said, you knew this was coming.
The hit true crime series returns. Wild Crime, 11 Skulls.
I'm more sane than most Americans.
Now streaming on Hulu.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a woman makes a dying request to a podcaster. Find the truth behind her sister's 1969 murder. We'll review Denise Didn't Come Home from Truth Media and Sony Music Entertainment. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Mr. Flynn.
Hello, Miss Lavoie.
What?
I'm Ms. Lavoie.
Ms. Lavoie. Hello, you can just come here and say Lavoie.
All right. Hey, Lavoie.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, and today when this comes out in quaint AF Exeter to see Holiday Open House downtown with the Festival of Trees and the live nativity where I was once the Virgin Mary.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a sec. And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
Toby, who would you play in a nativity?
What are my choices?
There's Jesus, baby Jesus.
There's Joseph.
Yeah.
There's his allegedly virgin mother.
There's the wee donkey.
There's the animals. There's donkeys. There's like an ass, right?
Don't forget the drummer boy.
Are there the wise men? Are they part of the
wise men, the magi. There's the little drummer boy.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Probably like wise man number 2.
Is that frankincense?
Frankincense? I don't know. Frankincense or myrrh? It's kind of a...
Yeah, number 2 or number 3.
It's a little hard to figure out.
Myrrh?
Myrrh.
It's like a herby thing or something. I don't know.
So basically, one of them brought an awesome present, and the other 2 brought shitty presents. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not as bad as the drummer boy. If I had a newborn baby, you show up at my fucking house with a drum, I will shove those sticks so far up your ass. Baby's trying to sleep. Ra-pum-pa-pum-pum. My
Keep
ass.
on moving, kid.
I'm going to pum your ass, drummer boy.
That's it.
Jesus, Kevin. Violent. Bringing violence to Christmas.
Oh, you think you're not violent. Ladies and gentlemen out there, if you think Kevin is overreacting, close your eyes and imagine you being in the maternity ward with your loving child and some asshole comes in with a drum.
Isn't there something about like... I am the goat with the curly horns.
Yeah, maybe.
Is that the nativity?
I think that's the Sound of Music. With the
Sound of Music that's got a goat with curly horns?
He's remembering the puppet show from the Sound of Music, not the nativity.
Oh.
Well, we all got to get to church.
Yeah.
Well, so we were at the church recently because they make announcements at the beginning of church and they're like, and the live nativity is coming up and we need some adult volunteers for the live nativity. So I volunteered Lance because if he puts his hair down, he looks like grown-up Jesus. And I'm thinking we could
He's
shake
not
up.
in the nativity, grown-up Jesus. Is he the ghost of Jesus' future?
That's
like coming back to haunt Jesus?
The adult Jesus?
Yeah, I was like...
That's like
and he's
Phantom,
like a little bit...
This is Phantom Menace Anakin, right? He's Darth
Vader. A little bit jacked for Jesus. I've never seen Jesus like...
Listen, I asked Minister M. Minister M said we could totally branch out this year and have adult Jesus because it is kind of a dead ringer.
No.
What?
Wait, will adult Jesus come back and question his mom's virginity? That's the question. Will he be like, Mom... Right. Come on, Mom.
How could you do that to Joseph, my dad?
It's like if Jesus was going to that diaper, like whatever place, in Chester or wherever it was.
Atkinson.
Oh, God.
Notice I specifically know exactly where the diaper spot was.
So they looked at you and said, Virgin Mary material.
Well, no, what happened was, this was a few years back. I got a call from the then youth minister who was like, Laura Bricker, we need your help. The Virgin Mary is sick and we need a stand-in. Can you do it? And I was like, I don't think you know what you're really asking here. You're asking me. I'm like, this could just like burst into flames. Our church could get struck by lightning. But I did it. And so they set up in front of the church during this holiday open house, like a petting zoo around it's really elaborate, this like makeshift like manger, and they build a little shed and all the animals run around, and there's also like llamas and stuff running around. And I was there with the baby Jesus, which was a doll that year, and its head fell off. the headless baby Jesus, and the whole town was like, oh my God, we can't believe they put her in there as the Virgin Mary.
Because you're such a... Is that why?
Oh, wow.
Just because it was just kind of funny. It was like...
Because the Virgin Mary doesn't talk as much as you do? Is that why? Virgin Mary is supposed to be like a silent woman standing off to the side, proclaiming her virgin innocence?
Yeah. And I was just like, why is this baby's head coming up? What's going on? Why is this Joseph 10 years old and I'm at like 40 or whatever it was?
Just wait till they see grown-up Jesus lurking around the manger.
Right.
Yeah. Mary full of...
all his tattoos.
We're rebranding the nativity this year.
We didn't realize Jesus had so much ink.
My friend Jason one year, Jason Schreiber, the great Jason Schreiber, who's like Johnny
Real
on the
dumpster
spot
guy, yeah.
Yeah, he was in the nativity one year, and he had to be one of the wise men. And it's really funny because like somebody took a picture of him very serious, but he had on like the wrong shoes or something. So then that picture got framed and put in our Yankee swap one Christmas.
I just want to tell everybody out there, if you've read A Prayer for Owen Meany and you know about the great literary scene that is the nativity scene in Owen Meany, that shit came from Exeter, New Hampshire. That was the inspiration for that shit.
John is from Exeter.
Yes,
right?
Yes, John Irving is from Exeter. He probably was forced to go to that stupid church and participate in this thing himself. He probably did not see the day on which he would die.
Stupid church.
No, I'm just saying.
John Irving was a shepherd.
Well, there was the Episcopal Church and the Congregational Church in the Prayer for Owen Meany. I go to the Congregational Church. The Episcopal Church is on the other side of town. They have a really nice organ at that church.
Yeah.
But we also have really good music at our church.
Yes.
And sometimes tambourines at our church.
Tambourines. Oh, well, now I got to show up.
Yes.
Little tambourine boy would have probably been okay.
No.
Little drummer boy, fuck you.
Well, it's true, because what happened was there was a wild secret tambourine player recently in the congregation, not part of the choir.
A rogue tambourine player.
Somebody just bring their tambourine under their coat to church?
There was a rogue tambourine player, and after church, Minister M texted me and was like, where was that tambourine coming from? They were playing out of sync. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, you got to tighten that
narrow
shit
it
up.
down.
Happy holidays, folks.
Exeter, New Hampshire. All right, Kevin.
Yeah.
This is obviously Thursday's program.
Oh my God, this has already gone off the rails.
What's coming up on Monday's show?
So on Monday, we're going to be talking about Laura Bricker's New Year's Eve party.
Okay.
Apparently, no, I'm just kidding. We're on Monday's show. We're going to talk about the podcasts inside McCamey Manor.
Oh, is that like Ghost Story?
No, this is about like a haunted house gone to the extreme.
Wow.
Toby flagged this one for us. This looks really interesting.
All right. I can't wait to listen to it. All right. Should we actually talk about the thing we're here to talk about?
Let's do it.
All right.
Parumpa-pum-pum.
Leading off.
The young girl was on her side, half clothed. She was covered in bruises and cuts, beaten and strangled. There was a red mark around her neck from the chain of her crucifix, and someone had left a bloody handprint on her leg.
Karen Falasca was the last person to see her sister Denise alive before she was murdered in 1969. Haunted by the tragedy, Karen spoke to podcaster Anthony Scalia about her 5-decade search for Denise's unidentified killer.
It's hard to let go when somebody dies the way she did, at the age that she did, at the height of beauty that she was, Like everybody kept saying, let it go.
Scalia retraced Karen's investigation into likely suspects, but the sister remained skeptical of the police's findings. And as a terminal illness threatened to take her life, Karen made one request of Scalia: finish her work and learn the truth behind Denise's murder.
I would learn so many things that Karen wanted to know, and I would learn other things that she didn't want me to know. And on this journey, I would think about Karen's words a lot. That if I got that feeling inside of me that I needed to go after something, I shouldn't be afraid.
In the podcast, Denise Didn't Come Home from Truth Media and Sony Music Entertainment, Scalia retraces Karen's investigation and questions the person the cops say strangled a 15-year-old all those years ago. He also recounts Karen's life story, their blossoming friendship, and explores whether her memories of that day hold up. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Denise Didn't Come Home. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, especially about the twist in this podcast, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Laura Bricker.
Yes.
This podcast starts off pretty straight, right? Like a formulaic. We've heard this before.
Yeah, this is like we're going to have the host come in and talk about the town where the murder happened. And it's the town where I grew up and I used to ride bikes. And he has some kind of generic kind of hallmarky sounding description of flower beds and everything is perfect and manicured and there's green grass and it's a nice place and blah, blah, blah. And then it was all happy until it wasn't. And then we go into the morning of the murder and, talking about within the green grass is a dead body. And I'm like, oh God, here we go.
But underground, the roots of these lawns run deep, stretching down like fingers into the dark. Bergen County has a history that I never knew until I grabbed a blade of grass and started to pull.
To me, I'm like, okay, this is the formula. We see this a lot in true crime shows and true crime podcasts and books. So I thought, okay, I'm here. I'll see what happens next.
Yeah, I think the concept is good, Laura. I'll agree some of the opening prose was a little purple, but
a little bit Toby space.
Yeah.
Oh, Toby, I'll give you a chance to weigh in.
Yeah. But instead of sort of going all in on solving a cold case, which, almost never goes anywhere in this, Anthony positions it as a story about Karen. And then telling us that she's dying raises the stakes, right? So, I think that's a smart way to set it up. But he also teases up front that, one of the things we're going to hear is an interview with her killer. And he worded it as, I would eventually talk to the man who killed her. And maybe should have said, the man who says he killed her. Or who the police say did it. Because that was...
Or not say that at all.
But I know I like that it's telegraphing that.
Yeah.
But, it's a chance to build anticipation. But he turned it into an immediate spoiler.
Yes.
It's will we find Karen's killer? Well, apparently you will.
Yes. There's no suspense in this podcast whatsoever. What about you, Toby? I saw you make a face when Laura was talking about the opening couple of minutes of the show.
Yeah, I had a real sinking feeling in the first couple of minutes because there was this metaphor about beneath the green grass or the grass roots that dig down far into the earth. And I think I'm sort of repressing the rest of it, but it was just a terrible, just a really bad beginning to it. And thankfully
it was she lit up the room kind of situation, right?
Yeah. It's fortunately that did not continue throughout. That was the one I was I don't know if I'm gonna be able to deal with an entire podcast full of this, but it kind of goes away after that. I thought that was actually the sort of low point of the entire podcast. Was the beginning, which is not the ideal way to start a podcast, but since I had to listen to it, I had to stick with it. And it actually, I'm sort of glad I did.
So, Toby, just a quick question for you, because I thought this, and this was just a distraction for me, and it's not our podcaster's fault here. But Were you or were you not distracted by the fact that his name is Anthony Scalia?
Yeah, at first I was like, wait, what?
I would consider changing my name, personally.
And then this guy, Richard Cottingham, which when I first, I was like, Richie Cunningham? So I was trying to envision a podcast where Anthony Scalia was looking into the crimes of Richie Cunningham. And that would have been awesome, quite honestly. But that's not this.
Yeah. So Laura, granted, given what we know happens later, and this is the spoilery section, so we can say it, Karen dies during the making of this podcast. We, I think, learn why it is he's so reliant on their phone conversations at the beginning to advance the narrative, especially around what happened to Denise.
Right.
That being said, that really didn't work for me. Because there are ways to write narration, say what happened, and then use phone tape in a judicious way so that it's more effective. And I actually think it became less effective and harder to listen to with the heavy use of phone tape. Do you agree with that?
It was painful.
Yeah.
Karen would replay that night over and over in her mind. That last moment when she and Denise parted ways.
It hounded me. Why didn't I follow her? Why didn't I follow her like I always followed her? Why did I listen? I could have kept it from going down.
This was really a story to me about the relationship that grows between Anthony and Karen. And I feel like after she died, he feels this obligation to see this through. But at the same time, it's like there was so much tape, and it was like he felt obligated to use all of the tape that he had with her. I'm like checking out because I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and that's not what I should be doing at that point. But I just felt like with some editing and some writing and maybe kind of summarizing some of this, instead of having these long conversations that are just going on and on without any editing, for me, that kind of lost its punch because we were losing kind of the ability to kind of summarize the story and move the story along. It kind of bogged down the story for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think if a different criticism of that, I mean, if the goal is to make Karen the emotional center and sort of reveal this growing friendship, I was kind of left wanting more, or at least to understand that more. Sarah Koenig showed the way with Adnan Syed, right? By going beyond the standard interview, right? I mean, he says we grew and we had this relationship and it blossomed and whatnot. But where are those gems in the tape? Right? I mean, the bits that showed something more unexpected about her, the reasons why he grew attached to her. Yes. Right? Can you show, because almost all that we do hear from her is related to the case in one way or another.
Right.
You know, the life that they had together and the things about her sister and the things that she's done. But what I don't hear, the other things about her, you know, I mean, if she's willing to make friends with the serial killer who allegedly murdered her sister, then it's pretty easy to think that she'd make friends with a podcaster. But I would just ask Anthony that, like, do you think that you captured Karen's essence beyond her fixation of the case? Do you think that you captured that and demonstrated that to the listeners? Because I feel like there's a lot of telling, but not a lot of showing when it comes to that.
It's interesting you say that. I found myself thinking about that too, because he says that at the end that they say they love each other. He talks about wanting to talk to her until 2 a.m. and they're telling. Yeah, we're essentially hearing her say the same things over and over again because that's what he's playing for us, right? It made me think about, I just went to this conference and this teacher was playing excerpts of a podcast that his 8th graders made about, he assigned groups of 4 ballot questions around the country. And, you know, he was basically demonstrating how they at first didn't know what they were doing. And those were the best little clips of tape he played. Like this kid was asking his friends these questions about this Arizona ballot measure. And then you could tell he sort of forgot what he was supposed to be doing. So he was like, how do you feel about Arizona iced tea? And that was like the hands down the best piece of tape in the whole thing. It made you know who the kid was. It made you want to listen to it more. And that spark for me was missing. But Toby, you actually have a different take on the conversations with Karen.
Yeah, I completely disagree.
I love this.
Bring it on.
I just found her to be pretty compelling. I don't know if it was her tone or attitude or whatever it was. I just found her much more compelling than listening to him read scripted stuff. And I don't think it would have worked with just some random other person. I don't know what it is about her way of talking. I just kind of felt kind of wrapped up in what she was saying. And I was like, is this weird? But it does seem like these younger men seem to become quite devoted to her after not knowing her very long. I mean, it's Anthony. There's that cold case detective who's just like, talks to her, is like, I'm going to fucking solve this thing. So I actually like that. I didn't really find it that boring. And I usually find stuff like that really boring. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that Kevin brought up Serial as well, because I pretty quickly could not divorce this from comparing it to Serial, like the whole podcast. And so I think that's another thing that kind of affected the way I kind of processed all this.
How come? Why were you connecting it to Serial?
Well, I think it's a very similar setup. You know, there's a high school age girl who's found dead, and the initial suspect is her former boyfriend, who there are these reasons to believe could potentially be violent. And then I don't know what the state of the whole Heyman Lee thing is now, but I know there was a time at which it was like, well, maybe it was this serial killer who was active or
yes. There was an active serial killer in the region who killed 2 other Asian girls, I believe.
Yeah. So that becomes sort of another theory, which in most cases you kind of find like somewhat implausible. It's like, well, all the cops are corrupt and they're trying to frame me. It's like when you can't find like another more reasonable solution, it's like, well, maybe it's a serial killer. In this case, it happened to be But I kept thinking about how this was going and how it compared to Adnan's case. Like the most obvious thing being this guy, Max, who's her old boyfriend, is white. And so I was thinking if it was a black kid who was like screaming threats at her from a car on the street, like how would that have ended up? You know, would he have gotten the benefit of the doubt if he had a big cut on his hand right after the murder?
Not to mention the other kid, Toby, who did a false confession. The other white kid who went into the cops and then he was basically read techniqued into giving this like 3 a.m. false confession. And then they talked to the sister again and she's like, no, he did drive me this place. So he had an alibi and they let him go. That wouldn't have happened in the Adnan Syed case.
You know, it's one of those things where once you get into that kind of mindset, it just kept playing over. And I think this is a much simpler and in some ways less compelling podcast than Serial. But I also think by being that way, it kind of avoids some of the mistakes that Serial made that everybody bitches about at this point.
Yeah.
I assume that when we go to the let's do what we do, I'm going to be more positive than everybody else. And I think the two big things for me were I found her a very compelling voice and the way she talked about things to be pretty affecting. And then the whole time I was kind of thinking about this seems like a different universe of the Adnan Syed thing where there's, they do move on from the former boyfriend who they suspect. And they do find that there's this alternate, suspect, probably the person who did it, who just comes out of nowhere. I mean, he's just really like, if you were reading a novel, you'd be like, well, this sucked because there's no foreshadowing or whatever. It's just like this guy who shows up out of nowhere and does this thing. But that's the reality in this case. So anyway, it's a lot of words to say that was kind of the lens through which I was taking a lot of this stuff in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think probably the four of us would agree that Karen seems to be a very compelling person. And then also when we know that she has a terminal illness, like it does raise the stakes for her emotionally and whatnot. And like the thing from Serial, like my point on to compare with Serial. And by the way, we very rarely compare any podcast to the original Serial in any manner. But there wasn't the scene like with Sarah and Adnan where he's talking about the crap that he makes in the kitchen. Right? There wasn't like those sort of little things there. It was mostly stuff that was all about her. And I would have liked to heard some more things that sort of spoke to maybe her generosity of spirit. Like, would you be generous enough to join us on Patreon?
Oh, I guess we're in the business section.
We're in the business section. And I could you just think about joining? I'm not going to get down on my...
We just made a hard left turn.
It was a hard left turn.
Into selling some stuff right from talking about that podcast. Just
Why
FYI.
Not? It's horrible. It's despicable. I get it.
It's the kind of tape that should have been in this podcast, in my opinion.
So if you join us at patreon.com/partners in crime media, you can get over 600 exclusive podcast episodes.
Plus,
you don't need to watch them all. When you get Netflix, you don't watch every goddamn thing that's on there.
You don't watch our podcast, A.
Yeah.
B, Mom, I would say that you can also get, if you join at the $15 level, you could have listened to this show already, early and ad-free. You could have. But you didn't because you're not on our Patreon yet. What were you saying, Kevin?
Oh, well, it's but if you join, it's just at the leading off level.
Yeah, $5.
$5, you get the Crime Writers on After Show. We just talked about the JonBenet Ramsey case this week. We have Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Get to hear Toby and his friends talk about, some of the better books that they've read. We have Married with Podcast, which is an advice show podcast with Rebecca and I giving unqualified advice on relationships. And we also have Rebecca's Readathon podcast, which is all the latest updates in the Karen Reed case. And there was some court action recently. Rebecca covered that. But if you join us also at the Bricker scale level, you get Laura Bricker's exclusive Leave It to Bricker podcast. Laura goes to the mall and goes skiing, for fuck's sake.
Go skiing.
The episode is very cute with her and Lance talking about their experience. But my takeaway is that the barbecue at the mall should be avoided.
Okay.
Yes.
No trichinosis or salmonella for me from that mall.
No, it wasn't that. It was that it was supposed to be gluten-free and it was not gluten-free.
Oh, yeah. Ick. If you're a deep diver, if you join us at that level, not only do you get all that other great stuff, but you also get to participate, watch Toby and his panels talk about the next deep dive. So you get to watch it before you listen to it. And on December 8th,
and we've resolved the tech issues with the deep dive, by the way. If you've been avoiding it, no need anymore.
I'll say that the last time it was on, Toby was recording with Janet Varney and Julia Lowry Henderson, and I was at a bar and I couldn't hear it, but I could watch it, and so I got in on the chat and just put that in, and everybody thought that was really sweet. But coming up next week, Toby's going to be recording the next deep dive, and what's the book, Toby?
It's called A Thread of Violence by Mark O'Connell.
Is it about a murdering quilter?
Would that it were. It's a really interesting book, actually. It's about a writer who trying to make sense of this guy who's sort of the last generation of the landed gentry in Northern Ireland. So they've kind of come to the point where the money is running out in that family. There's like 72 hours of just complete madness where he murders a couple people and tries this crazy robbery. And then when he's kind of on the lam, he's hiding out with the Irish equivalent of our Attorney General.
Whoa.
So it's this crazy story, and it's about this writer who I think writes really well and thoughtfully, like just trying to figure out what the hell happened during that period. And the guy who did this is like a total eccentric. I've been really enjoying it. Really looking forward to reading it at night. So I think it'll be a good discussion.
All right.
Yeah, and we always forget to mention that we have Facebook groups. We have the official...
I mention it every time.
Well, hold on. We have more than one Facebook group.
Oh, we do?
We have the official Crime Writers on Discussion Facebook group. You can join, but there's also a Facebook group for the Brichter Scalers. There's one for the Deep Divers, the Dive Bar, and we have one for Married with Podcast Let's Discuss. Join all of that. Get the discussion going early.
Yeah.
Now, we also have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things. Everybody's shopping for Christmas. Rebecca, can you tell us what are this week's Amazon recommendations?
Has nothing to do with Christmas, Kevin. It has to do with swimming.
Okay.
I just bought some really cute, because I've joined the swim shirt lifestyle. I wear a bathing suit to the beach and then put a shirt on to go in the water because you don't have to put sunscreen on your back, and it's just way more relaxing and you can be out there for longer. I just bought the cutest freaking swim shirts on Amazon. One of them has skulls all over it. One of them has this cute flower pattern all over it. They're so cute. I'll put the link in our store.
And Toby, what are your listener-inspired Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations?
All right, this first one, the options seem limitless. Med Pride Black Nitrile Medical Examination Gloves.
What? Oh.
Large, 100 count, ultra strong, 6 mil thick latex and rubber-free disposable powder-free gloves for, and then it just ends.
Murdering.
So you can put
for
in
murders.
anything you want after that.
They're for murders.
Cutting up the chicken at Chipotle.
Murders.
Yeah. Murders.
And just to throw a just completely different type of gift or purchase is Gilmore Girls, the official knitting book.
Oh.
Knit your way through Stars Hollow and beyond. And I know which one your favorite was, Laura. I think it might have been the Bigfoot shower curtain liner.
Oh.
But I was going to save that, but I guess I blew it.
There's plenty of time to shop with us at Amazon. You go to amazon.com/shop/Crime Writers On. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin, before we end the business section, I have a very important question for you. Mm-hmm. Do we have any Patreon Saints of the Week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Megan Gregg and Allison Cox. And I want to say Allison and Megan were among the first 2 patrons ever to sponsor us on Patreon.
So why did it take you so freaking long to make them saints?
I don't know. I sent them special messages sort of apologizing, saying this is long overdue. But we opened our Patreon in August 2016, and they were the first 2 to sign up, and they've still been with us, and we really appreciate that.
Oh my goodness, we love you so much. Can you tell other people how awesome it's been, so maybe they'll be inspired to join too, folks? I thank you so much for being with us for so long, being part of our community. Thanks to everyone who listens to the Stupid Business section and this podcast. Whether you're a patron or not, we value you all. Kevin, does thus end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. So, Toby.
Yep.
Who's our next sponsor for this program?
Toby doesn't know.
Oh. He doesn't?
He doesn't. Why would you be asking him?
That's a good point.
Yeah, okay, so we're sponsored by our friends over at Quince.
Oh, my fave.
Yeah, why is gift giving so enjoyable?
Because it feels good to have people open stuff that they like.
Yeah, right, so it's... So I'm sorry, that was a rhetorical question that I was supposed to answer. Like, why is it enjoyable for me?
Ah.
Because Okay, because I'm kind of bad at giving gifts.
You're very bad at it.
So, like, to have a nice prompt for something, especially when it comes to clothing, because I think as a dude, we can agree that it's sometimes hard to pick out, like, really great stuff. But it's all, I mean, what makes a great outfit is not just something that looks good on you, but a little bit of luxury, right? So you get quality gifts at an affordable price for Quince. Now, as much as I like giving gifts, I like giving myself stuff.
You also like getting gifts.
I like getting gifts. You know what I just did? I bought a pair of joggers from Quince.
You love those
for under
joggers.
$50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had joggers before, and so they really like how they fit and they look. But Quince has a whole bunch of stuff for under $50. It is perfect for the holiday season. Plus, it's really quality stuff.
Gift luxury this holiday season without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/crime.
Crime!
For 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime.
Crime!
To get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Crime.
With Sling, you get all your favorite news programs for just $40 a month.
What if I only watch news about whether or not I can afford a boat?
$40 a month.
What about news about how I lost money on the stock market, then made money on the stock market, then...
Still $40.
What about news I only watch so I have something to make small talk about in uncomfortable situations? Did you know police captured 5 runaway zebras in Washington yesterday?
Well played. Get all your favorite news programs for the best price. Sling lets you do that. Visit sling.com/now to see your offer.
Now streaming on Hulu.
This guy is an evil genius. He's the best serial killer that ever existed.
He compared himself to Ted Bundy.
The serial killer you don't know.
Who is this guy?
Pure evil. This is not just any killer.
In his own words.
Put my head right up to her ear and I said, you knew this was coming.
The hit true crime series returns. Wild Crime, 11 Skulls.
I'm more sane than most Americans.
Now streaming on Hulu.
All right, so we were talking about Richard Cottingham briefly earlier, a.k.a. Richie Cunningham, as Toby kept confusing him with. Laura, this is a guy who's in prison for murdering a couple of women, and the cops are now talking to him, as we hear in the podcast anyway, and he's giving them details on other murders he committed in exchange for slightly better treatment and in exchange for them not putting all this in the media or whatever, which, by the way, this is a podcast, guys. It's in the media now.
Certain foods that he wanted to have brought in from the outside, and he gave us a list of these things. The little bits of information he continued to give us, we'd come back for more and more and more. And he could ask for more and more and more.
Laura, do you think that Richard Cottingham killed Denise, yes or no?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I kind of went back and forth on this, and I have to say, it reminded me of, there was a case in Texas that we reviewed a while ago, and it was like the guy confessed to all these other murders.
The guy with the 2 first names.
The confession killer.
Yeah, like Richard...
Henry Lee Lucas?
Henry Lee Lucas, yeah.
Yeah, that sort of defense investigator in me always kind of wonders when you hear about somebody who's in on one murder with one MO, which was like the torso killer, and then all of a sudden now he's the teenage killer too, and he was also the Times Square killer, right? Like, is he really all of these things? Does he know just enough of the details because of the way that they're talking to him, and he wants more fried chicken? Or, he likes pizza. He doesn't want fried chicken. He wanted fried chicken. He wanted pizza and hot dogs. Or is he's liking this attention because it's kind of boring when you're in jail all the time. And back to the, like, did he or didn't he? I mean, it's like, it sounds possible. He listened to him. He's in these weird emails with Karen. And I'm like, is he stringing her on? Does he actually have information? And I think that's what we're supposed to think. But at the end, I feel like the police seem pretty confident that they got the guy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say yes, but I still have some doubts.
What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm a no on that, actually. This guy's mouth was shut for years until he's busted for gambling, and so in exchange for pizza and small considerations, he's going to take credit for a murder that happened 13 years before his documented killings. I mean, he also got re-techniqued. We heard it. The investigator says, did you ever kidnap a girl on such and such a road? And he says, yes.
Do you recall abducting a girl from Old Road? I definitely took a girl from Old Road.
And then he remains incredibly vague about the case forever until it's clear there's no further consideration unless he's forthcoming. And then again, he gets details wrong and whatnot. And of course, okay, it's like at this point, 40 or 50 years later for him. But, they say, well, he had no reason to lie.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he clearly had reason to play along because we've seen this, like you said, in a bunch of these cases. And so I just think people underestimate the power of boredom and resignation. Karen was dubious in the beginning. I'm just surprised that nobody else was, or they just kind of dropped that.
I agree with you, Kevin.
No, I was convincing. I was convincing.
No,
Good.
I don't think he did it either. Yeah.
I think what it is that I want to believe because I want there to be a resolution to this case for the family.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it where I'm like, well, maybe, yeah, because I just want some sort of outcome in this because it's been going on so long.
Yeah, it's like, he's not getting anything out of it. Yeah, he's literally getting stuff out of it.
He even got re-techniqued.
He got to go to the DA's office. He got to leave prison and go to the DA's office to talk to the cold case guy for days on end.
Yeah.
That's a big deal for him.
He also gets re-techniqued a little bit by Karen through email because she doesn't say what color were those cars you owned. She says, what color was the Buick that you owned? She narrows it down for him, right? And then he says, I believe it was light blue. I mean, if she thought the car was light colored, if she thought the car was silver, if she thought the car was white, light blue would fit all of those potential memories. So yeah, I don't think he did it either. I think that these guys are game players. A guy like him, I do think he obviously murdered people. We know he did, and is probably trying to build up his legacy a little bit more. What do you think, Toby, about this guy Cottingham?
I don't really have an opinion about whether he's telling the truth or not, but he's not a good guy.
Nope.
This stuff, he's a sadist. He really seems like the nightmare that you think about when you think about serial killers.
He's coming for your girlfriend.
Yeah. So I'm glad, I'm glad he's behind bars.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where you can't really trust him. And again, the stuff that's being used to verify it, like you said, is pretty vague, and they've fed him so much information just in the questions they ask that it's pretty easy, especially after you watch that Henry Lee Lucas one and you see Henry Lee Lucas, who is not a smart dude by any stretch of the imagination, is able to put together this stuff. And if the people who are questioning him want it enough, they'll fill in the gaps for him.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to know. You don't come to the end of this and be like, wow, that they really tied that up in a neat bow.
Right.
I think for the purposes of this podcast, what's important is that Karen feels some such of closure before she passes.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that she kind of gets to the point where it's like, well, this is about as close as I'm going to get. So I'm just going to accept it and move on. Because it seems, you guys were talking, and Kevin in particular, about how you don't get much else from her other than her sort of obsession with her sister's murder. And again, I don't know if this is the way Anthony was kind of playing it or whatever, but it does seem like that was the dominant thing in her life, right? Because her daughter's just like, well, it would call to talk about her grandkids, and she would be like, oh, I gotta take this call about the murders and stuff. And that it just kind of took over her life, and she didn't. Her other relationships were sort of put on the side. And again, it sounds like a novel, right? It sounds like a detective novel where the wife and the kids are like, you're always gone. You're always looking for this one case. And the guy's like, well,
it's been haunting me.
Yeah, exactly. Let me do my thing. But, there's no reason for the daughter after her mom's passed to say something like that about her mom, unless it's at least true, sort of emotionally to her. So, yeah, in the end, it kind of feels like this is all about trying to make Karen feel comfortable before she dies that there's been some kind of resolution. And that seems to have worked.
Yeah.
And what the reality of it is at this point, if it was somebody else, they've probably gotten away with it. And if it was him, it was just one in a series.
Yeah. I'll just say the other reason why I doubt him so much is the fake ending the emails in the middle of the sentences game that he was playing with her.
That's awesome.
He was so articulate in those emails, but then it was but he was a slow typer. I'm like, no, he wasn't. He was just playing games. It would be and then I wrapped my arms around her oh, I gotta go. It was like really bad. It was really, he was just in my mind
He understands a good cliffhanger.
But he was enjoying, I think he was enjoying the relationship. I think he was enjoying the fact
we've seen this in The Letter, both seasons of The Letter.
Yep.
You know,
you don't meet new people in prison.
Yeah.
And so you will draw out, these new relationships as long as you can. And you'll give the person you're talking to what you think they want in order to keep the relationship going. It happens all the time. Laura, obviously Karen did not fall in love with Cottingham. She was having these conversations with him to get more information about her sister's murder, to try to vet his story. But she does treat him, from his side of things, it would probably look to him like they had a relationship of some kind. What do you think about the way that she dealt with him?
Well, I think in the beginning, I think she was kind of trying to do anything to get him to share information and to see what he would tell her. But there was the part where she kind of is like, fuck this, I've had enough of his shit, and kind of called him out. And I thought that was really interesting when she's like, I've read your confession. It sucks. Maybe you're not going to tell me anything, but just tell me the truth. And then starts asking him more direct questions because he's being so evasive about things. And then finally she was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm not going to engage with him anymore. And I'm like, that's probably the right decision at that point. But it was like, you could see after all this time, it's like she's followed this path, and then she's working in this field in the area where the JonBenet Ramsey case happens. And it's like her whole life is consumed by investigations, getting to the point that she's finally communicating with him. I think she did try to establish that rapport in the beginning, but I appreciated it when we started to hear her just being like, yeah, you're full of shit. Yeah. And here's one question I want to ask you, and not buying into that back and forth that he was really enjoying that back and forth.
So, Kevin, there is a big twist at the end of the podcast, right? We find out that this long story Karen has been retelling Anthony is not exactly the same as the story that she gave at the time of the murder.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so her misremembering big details of the case, that was, for me, a satisfying twist at the end. And I think maybe should have been contemplated before, at least in the narrative of the podcast series. Yeah, I agree. Now, while the journey I thought was lackluster, I thought the destination was very interesting there. But it's still what does that mean? Okay, so she was wrong about that. She believed this one other thing. Was she beating herself up for decades over something that didn't happen? I felt like there could have been a little more introspection there. I really found that super interesting. I think that said something, but I don't think it was explored in the podcast.
Sports fans, listen up. With Sling, you can watch your favorite sports all year round for the best price. Plus, only Sling lets you control what channels you pay for, all starting at $40 a month. At that price, there's no such thing as an off-season. Get pro and college football, baseball, hockey, pro and college basketball, and more, all for the best price. Go to sling.com to customize your channel lineup. Sling lets you do that.
Now streaming on Hulu.
This guy is an evil genius. He's the best serial killer that ever existed.
He compared himself to Ted Bundy.
The serial killer you don't know.
Who is this guy?
Pure evil. This is not just any killer.
In his own words.
Put my head right up to her ear and I said, you knew this was coming.
The hit true crime series returns. Wild Crime, 11 Skulls.
I'm more sane than most Americans.
Now streaming on Hulu.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Okay, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know. Should they listen to Denise Didn't Come Home, the podcast? Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
I'm going to go thumbs sideways with this podcast. I think the story and the characters in this story were, people that I wanted to hear from. This story of this cold case, this murder of this teenage girl that has been unsolved all these years is definitely something that you're listening to and you want to know what happens. Why I'm going thumbs sideways and not thumbs up, I think for me, this struggled with what I felt like sort of a lack of editing to a point that I felt some suspense when I was listening to it and wanting to keep listening, because there were like long sections of tape and conversations that were important to the people that were involved, but they could have been packaged in a way that would have more effectively connected with the listener. The podcast to me suffered because of that. And it felt like there were times that because of that, I was tuning out and like having to kind of redirect myself back to listen. You know, I think it had a lot of interesting stuff about cold case detectives and how cases are reexamined. And it really at the heart of this was a relationship between a host of a podcast and the sister of the victim. And that was a very interesting friendship to explore. But overall, just thumbs sideways for me, because it was just, there were parts of this that just dragged.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Denise Didn't Come Home?
I'm a thumbs up. Yeah, I think I liked this better than everybody else did. I actually found Karen to be pretty, I don't know if compelling is the right word, but I thought the way she talked was a lot more interesting than if they'd cut it short and sort of tried to sum things up, or more scripted stuff from Anthony, who's like the host and narrator. I thought she was good in kind of describing her memories of what had happened, and you got a sense of her sort of single-mindedness and trying to figure out what had happened and get justice for her sister. So anyway, as you can tell, I've got some conflicted feelings, but I would give it a strong, mild thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
I think I got to go thumbs down. I mean, I think it's an achievement that Anthony like stuck with this for so long. He's so earnest. And, you know, at one point you even hear him like he doesn't think like he's the one who's going to be the host of this. Like he just thinks he's doing some great news gathering. And sometimes I just hate like punching down on people that like really are trying hard. I think the raw material was there, but the storytelling was just kind of blah, the way it was put together. There was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing about why Karen is the emotional center of this story. And I think it lacks a lot of sort of introspection, challenging the facts that are presented, pushing back on the people who are there, pushing back on people's claims. So I think that probably in different hands, this could have been turned into a more interesting podcast, because I do see, you know, the basics of it there. But in the end, I just don't think it was executed well. So I'm sorry, but I'm a thumbs down.
I am very close to being a thumbs down. I'm about as thumbs sideways facing down as one can get and still be sideways. There is no suspense in this podcast at all. And I think about another podcast we listened to this year, which is now one of my favorite podcasts of all time, which also is about a historic crime that took place a long time ago, where we may know who has done it. And that includes a lot of phone tape. And that's Beyond All Repair, which was put together in a way that suspense was built into almost every minute of the podcast. Every episode, you had a real sense of like momentum forward, and I gotta listen to the next one. And Kevin, you're right. All the material and the story is here to make that kind of show where you have to listen to the next one. Absolutely. And I at no point felt that way in this show. I just felt like, okay, there's another one. Let's listen to the next one. Even like the teasers at the end were just like, yeah, I saw that coming. Like it wasn't edited well. It really does come down to editing.
And why weren't you down?
Because it's not bad.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
It's not a bad podcast. Like I can't say that it's as bad as some things that I've given a thumbs down to. It's just lacking all the things that could have made it good. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I am with it. So yeah, thumbs sideways for me for Denise Didn't Come Home. That's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, I got to ask you a question. Do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do. This one comes to us from Kathy Mossy in our Facebook discussion group. And Kathy sent this I loved it because it kind of reminded me, it's like the holidays. And this picture was like a super nostalgic picture. Looks like Kathy and her two kids when they're adopting the cat. It's like one of those, like, what are the ones that used to come out the front of the camera instantly? Polaroid, thank you. It looks like a Polaroid
picture, not
photo.
Cat, right? Okay.
It's a picture of the cat. And so 19 years ago, her daughters decided their cat Magic needed a buddy. They found a rescue cat named Chin. Thanks to his black chin marking, the girls knew Dad would be more agreeable to another pet if we went with a tech theme, so Chin became Chip, and he joined the family.
Nice.
So unfortunately, Chip has now passed away, but he had a long and healthy life. And
with his Philip Zimbardo beard.
Rest well, Chippy, with your beard. When I saw the picture, I was like, you know what? It just feels like a nostalgic holiday kind of photo, and I think Chippy needs a little send-off.
All right, Laura Bricker. Folks want to reach out to you to pitch any animal of any kind to be Cat of the Week. Of course, they can email us at crimewriterson@gmail.com or put it in our Facebook group. But if they want to find you online, how would they find you there?
They can find me at Laura Bricker on Instagram and Blue Sky, and I'm still over on the Twitter, which I always call the Twitter, although I usually just go over there to check things out.
All right. Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you and say, Toby, you were right about Denise Didn't Come Home and the other three were completely wrong. How can they find you on social media?
Well, if you've never followed me before, you might as well just follow me on Blue Sky, because I imagine that's probably where I'm going to be. So I'm there at Toby Ball NH.
What about you, Kevin?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn, and the P stands for Parumpapum.
Except on Blue Sky, you're just Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, just search Kevin Flynn. There's only 7 of us.
That's right. I'm also on Blue Sky at Reb Lavoie. I'm still on X. I am on Instagram, too, if you want to see pictures of my dogs. Mostly, I encourage you to join our incredible community in our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. Just find our Facebook page. There's a link there on how to join the group. Get episodes early and ad-free, plus all the other stuff we make for Patreon at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the really, 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 really wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin Flynn. This show is recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we also will confess to crimes in exchange for food.
Meat lovers pizza, bitches!
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
Toby, did you turn on a light? Like a ring light?
I did.
Because now you're really a Simpsons character.
Can you adjust it, like bring it down a bit, or does it have a color temperature change?
I just turned it off.
Oh, you just turned it off, so it's not on right now?
Correct.
You were extra yellow there for a minute.
See, I was trying to figure out what light would be best, so that when I approached the camera with alarming whatever it was, I was trying to turn off the light that's on that side.
And he was all yellow.
In Crime Media.
Norwegian Cruise Line invites you to experience more in the Caribbean, Alaska, Europe, and beyond. For a limited time, get 50% off all cruises and enjoy NCL's all-new More at Sea cruising package, including unlimited open bar, specialty dining, and more. Visit ncl.com, call your travel advisor, or 1-888-NCL-CRUISE. Offer ends soon. Norwegian Cruise Line. Ships registry the Bahamas and USA. Restrictions apply.